starting with verse 23, says that we have a tendency to be careful, very careful, in the small matters. That there are people, and even yourself, who have majored on the minors instead of focusing on the majors, right? The important stuff. In fact, so many people cause themselves a great deal of worry and concern and frustration over little, tiny things. Do I have a hair that's not perfectly lying down flat? Oh, my upper lip is slightly thinner and not as full as my lower lip. Oh, my nails are not so perfect, and my suit has this little wrinkle. It may look good, but that little wrinkle over there, that will bother me all day long. You've heard people talk about that. Matthew 23, at verse 23, also talks about, Jesus was talking about the Pharisees, and he said that you take such care in cleaning the outside, but you've not cleaned the inside. He was talking about cups at that time. However, the reference is not limited to cups. It's also about us. You have seen people, male and female. You've probably even seen a house, or let's say a cake that just looks so beautiful on the outside. That icing is gorgeous. The decorations are immaculate. Everything is fantastic in appearance on the outside. But then when you open it up, when you bite into that cake and it's or have you ever sliced into a cake and noticed that the layers were not actually even? Because sometimes when cake decorators have a slightly flawed layer, they will increase the icing on the outside to make the cake look nice and even and presentable and beautiful, covering the flaw on the inner side of the cake. Jesus was talking to us about that very thing. Having the form of morality, having a form of beauty. People today, many people think that beauty is a certain image. Carefully made up, carefully coiffed hair, the finest muscular physique. And they miss the flaws on the inside. Oh, come on, man. You know what I'm talking about. You've seen that beautiful woman, gorgeous, decorated hair, arrayed in beautiful attire. You see this person is just exquisite in their appearance, and you thought, oh, I want to talk to that person, and you go up to them. If you get the courage, you go up to them and you say, excuse me, I'd like to introduce myself, and then you talk to them, and then they snarl at you because there's that form of beauty. God also speaks in Matthew 23 about how the Pharisees and Sadducees were so focused on their outer appearance, and that the tombs, he referred to them as being nice and white, beautiful on the outside, pretty in appearance, but being full of dead men's bones. Well, you've seen it even in our nation's monument, the cemeteries for our military and the fallen. Beautiful white grave markers, all over the national monument where the fallen are buried. All of those headstones, beautiful, white, crisp, clean, all neatly placed in a row. And yet, within are dead men's bones. But also, not in the physical sense, but look at the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and even people today who claim to be holy, dress on the outside, appearing holy, appearing moral, appearing clean, and on the inside, rotten to the bone. The form of godliness without the power thereof. Based on feelings, based on the rationale, the reason of their own mind, the reasonings of their own mind. Interesting that when you read the scriptures, any of the prophets, and certainly any of the New Testament, notice that none of the authors, none of the prophets, not even our Messiah, Jesus, ask us if a certain scripture seemed reasonable, or if we felt that a certain activity was okay. They didn't ask us that. They didn't even ask us to think of it as if we thought it was reasonable or if it felt good. In fact, the scriptures very often say, especially of chastisement, it says, no chastisement is good at the moment. No chastisement feels comfortable in the moment, but that the long-term result of that chastisement makes us better. So oftentimes today, the focus then is not wanting to look within ourselves, not wanting to have a authority by which we would measure ourselves, by which we would determine what is just, what is truth, what is even beautiful. Not having that compass, not having that decisive, authoritative document or person has caused us to many times make poor choices, treat others inappropriately, oppress many based on whether it feels good or if I feel it right now. I mean, if I'm not feeling it, that is being courteous towards you, does that make it more appropriate because I'm not feeling it at that moment? So you understand that basing our perception of God on our emotions cannot be the appropriate measure of all things, because our emotions are limited. In fact, many times people struggle just in trying to define how they are feeling at the moment. We often limit ourselves in the use of vocabulary in attempting to describe an emotion or a particular thing, an event, our response to some sort of stimulus. As I said before, Romans 1 says, 1:30 says that our emotions are hostile to God, and our hearts, the inner man, actually hates God. Our hearts are deceitful, as I said earlier. You can't trust it. In fact, many times people know this just on a very base level. They know it in themselves that they really can't trust their heart. How many times has a person, quote, followed their feelings only to find later that the direction that they took, the action that they made, was the inappropriate action? You cannot base our moral decisions, our correct actions, simply on our gut feeling. As I spoke earlier, John says we don't want the truth, we don't want the light, because we love the darkness. That is just in our fallen nature. As I implied before, because we do not walk with God as we once did, we are so far away, so far removed, so far out of His presence. The original relationship that was established with man in the garden, with all of the needs being met, all of the appropriate atmosphere balances in chemicals, light, sunshine, heat, cold, all of that perfect nature in His presence was immediately removed when Adam and Eve fell to the doubt that Satan instilled in them, and would continue to fall further and further away from not just the physical presence of God, but also the right thinking about God. In fact, it was almost immediate after that there was the first murder. Then, if we rely on these scriptures and we take note of the fact that our minds and our emotions, our thinking and our feelings are not the proper place to begin to develop what is true, what is moral, then we can begin to see why it is necessary to acknowledge God and develop an understanding of how He wants us to relate, not only to Him, but to each other. So I bring you to the prayer that Jesus taught us. He first acknowledges the Father, and then He asks that we would be forgiven as we have forgiven others. The 10 Commandments even provide us with a pattern. The first set of the commandments speak to our relationship to God. The second speaks to our relationship to others, and then within ourselves and our own behavior.